For 5 months, I sat beside Julian Foster while he slept in a hospital bed. I studied there, ate there, and told him every foolish thing that happened at school, even though he never opened his eyes. The doctors said he might wake in a few days, a few years, or never. I told them I would wait for the rest of my life if I had to. Then I entered an interschool race and saw him standing beyond the finish line. I had just run 5 kilometers, answered a dozen academic questions, fallen hard enough to tear open my palms, and crossed the line in first place. Water bottles appeared in front of me from every direction. Among all those hands, I saw a pair of familiar white shoes, familiar jeans, and the white jacket I had missed every day. Julian stood there holding out a bottle of water. I stared without blinking. I had imagined him moving so many times that I no longer trusted my own eyes. He crouched in front of me, cleaned the cuts on my hand, and covered them with bandages exactly as he used to. Then he looked up and asked whether it still hurt. Those simple words pulled me out of 5 months of darkness. He said he had only just awakened. His father had told him that a boy named Ethan Hayes had stayed beside him day and night, so he had come straight to find me. Before he could finish, I threw myself into his arms. We held each other so tightly that it felt as if we could become one person. I cried and scolded him for waking too soon. I told him he should have slept another year and made me wait longer. He tried to kiss me, but I covered his mouth and reminded him that we were still at school. I grabbed his hand and told him we were going home to kiss instead. Half a year earlier, I had sworn that I could never fall for a boy. At that time, Julian Foster was only my irritatingly perfect deskmate, the top student in our grade, and the person everyone mistakenly believed I loved. 6 months earlier, after I pinned Kyle Turner to the basketball court and beat him until he nearly called for his grandfather, Mr. Thomas Clark summoned me to read my 3rd public apology of the semester. I tapped the microphone to test it, almost made Mr. Clark explode, then began in the most solemn voice I could manage. I said that I was deeply sorry to Kyle Turner from class 12. The previous day, while I was playing basketball, Kyle had accused me of being shameless, delusional, and secretly in love with Julian Foster. I then made a mistake that almost every man in the world had made. I allowed my hand to have inappropriate and intimate contact with his face. The entire school burst into laughter. Mr. Clark ordered me to explain clearly. I said that I had only punched Kyle until he bled, then innocently asked what our teacher had been imagining. When I reached the sentence where I apologized for not being gentle enough, Mr. Clark finally lost his temper. He said I had a brain but refused to use it in literature, which explained why I failed the subject. I kept staring at his head, so he demanded to know what I was looking at. I honestly told him that his hair loss seemed serious and offered to recommend a shampoo. The principal had to rescue me before Mr. Clark ended my life. Principal Martin praised me for winning first place in the national physics competition and earning a perfect physics score. Then he sighed because I had failed the other 5 subjects. He had seated the top student in the grade beside me, yet my scores had not improved at all. He told me to stop solving problems with my fists and turn my supposed feelings for Julian into motivation to study. I was too lazy to explain that my crush on Julian was only a misunderstanding, so I nodded obediently. Principal Martin called Julian out in front of everyone and told him to help me. Julian calmly said that he understood. The rumor had begun when I fell asleep during physical education. One earbud dropped to the ground while the other was playing a song by a singer whose voice sounded like Julian. Liam Carter picked it up. By the end of the day, the entire school believed I was in love with my deskmate. The real culprit was Julian, who had been playing with my phone and changing my music list for days. When we returned to class, he had the nerve to ask whether I really liked him. I reminded him that he was the only person who had touched my phone. Before I could settle the matter, I reached into my desk for a pen and grabbed a cockroach. I jumped onto the desk so fast that the whole class fell silent. Julian pressed his lips together to hide his laughter. I planted my hands on my hips and threatened the cockroach, saying that it had better never meet me again or I would crush it to death. Ryan Summers said that my jumping ability on the basketball court must have been trained by cockroaches. Lucas Reed laughed like a pig being slaughtered, loudly enough to summon Mr. Clark from the floor below. The moment our teacher appeared, Ryan became perfectly serious. I twisted my face into the ugliest expression I could make. Ryan burst out laughing, so the student taken to the discipline office changed from me to him. Julian watched the entire trick with clear amusement. I demanded to know why he was staring. He asked whether people needed to buy a ticket to look at my face. I noticed a jasmine scent on him and asked whether he wore perfume. He said the housekeeper might have sprayed something on his clothes, then asked whether it smelled good. I told him it smelled slightly better than my socks. He went silent for a moment, then nodded and said I was impressive. Our next class belonged to our homeroom teacher, Mr. Owen Hall. He walked in carrying English books even though it was supposed to be literature. Stealing another teacher's lesson was his favorite habit. He warned us not to pretend that we were photographing notes while secretly opening games. I was only browsing a game page while Julian was actually playing, but Mr. Hall praised Julian for studying attentively. During speaking practice, Mr. Hall made me translate a simple sentence. Julian wrote the answer for me. I read his handwriting as a chain of strange sounds, and he lowered his face to the desk because he was laughing too hard. The next sentence was longer, so I surrendered and said that I did not know. Ryan had just slipped back into the classroom, so Mr. Hall called on him instead. His translation was even worse than mine. After Chloe Bennett, our English class monitor, answered perfectly, Mr. Hall said that Ryan and I spoke a language no human being could understand. He also reminded me that the English teacher had complained about my snoring. I corrected him seriously. It was not snoring, only the soft nasal sound made by someone enjoying excellent sleep. A piece of chalk immediately flew toward my head. I dodged it and admitted my mistake. Later, Ryan secretly gave me a packet of beans famous for producing gas. I ate one, felt my stomach swell, and drank water in an effort to contain the danger. After class, Ryan dragged me to the discipline office and confessed that he had told Mr. Clark about the face I had made. Several teachers demanded a performance. I refused, so Mr. Clark began lecturing us. Then a terrible smell spread through the office. Ryan had eaten a chive pastry and nearly the entire packet of beans. One teacher after another invented an excuse and fled. Mr. Clark endured 2 more minutes. After Ryan released a 4th wave, he waved us away and said that he would suffocate if he kept talking. I ran from the office believing that if I moved fast enough, the smell could not catch me. Ryan continued poisoning the class during physics. Julian and I both stuffed paper into our noses, making Mr. Carter think we had simultaneous nosebleeds. The student beside Ryan begged to change seats. At first, Mr. Carter told everyone that it was only gas and would soon pass. 10 minutes later, he closed his book and announced that we should study by ourselves because he needed to leave first. The class escaped into the corridor. I ran to the courtyard and bent down to tie my shoelace. A ripping sound came from behind me. My uniform trousers split from the crotch all the way to the waist, revealing the red floral underwear my mother had recently sent me. Julian appeared at exactly that moment. He walked around me for a better look, then laughed until he almost fell to the ground. He asked whether I liked red floral underwear. I asked whether he had a problem with it. Still laughing, he said that he had no problem as long as I liked it. I wanted to run home and change, but Julian removed his uniform jacket and tied it around my waist. He told me to wait in class, then disappeared. 10 minutes later, he returned with a pair of his athletic trousers inside a red floral bag. With a perfectly serious expression, he explained that it was the only bag available at his house and that he was not mocking me. His trousers were so long that the cuffs nearly swept the floor. Everyone recognized them. For the rest of the afternoon, students stared as if I were wearing clothes borrowed from a celebrity instead of my deskmate. During the final physical education class, Kyle and I had to sweep leaves as punishment. The moment Kyle saw Julian's trousers on me, he called me shameless. He said Julian was the wealthy heir of the Foster family and the top student in our grade, while I would never be worthy of him. I ignored the first 2 insults. At the third, I threw down my broom and chased him. Kyle hid behind Julian. I told Julian to move so I could deal with the brat. Julian asked for permission to say one thing first. Then he warned Kyle that if his mouth felt itchy, he should scrape it against the wall. If Julian ever heard him say such things to me again, he would make sure Kyle disappeared from the school. Kyle was so frightened that he cried and apologized repeatedly. Julian stepped aside, curved his lips, and told me I could continue. I could not hit someone who was crying, so I ordered Kyle to keep sweeping. The little coward still turned around and blew me a kiss, so I threw my broom at him. While we swept, Chloe approached Julian with a love letter. She confessed that she liked him and wanted to date him. Julian glanced at the letter and said he was not interested. Chloe asked whether he already had a girlfriend. He said he did not, which only made her more confused. Julian repeated that he did not like her and had no interest in her. She ran away in tears. I watched her leave and wondered what was so wonderful about Julian that people allowed him to break their hearts. After we finished, he asked whether Kyle had said anything else. He complained that I had become cold toward him immediately after borrowing his trousers. I said I would return them the next day, then went to an internet cafe with Cody Hill. We played until after midnight. I spent another hour opening packages my mother had mailed, so I did not sleep until nearly 2 in the morning. The next day, I could barely keep my eyes open in Mr. Hall's class. I even brought an English book while he was teaching mathematics. I told Julian to wake me if the teacher approached, then rested my head on my hand. Every time my head began to fall toward the desk, Julian's palm quietly caught it. I heard the teacher say something in my sleep and suddenly jumped up, thinking he had called my name. Julian quickly wrote an excuse for me, saying that standing helped me stay awake. That saved me from punishment, but Mr. Hall made me solve a calculus problem. Julian wrote the answer and I read it aloud. When I sat down, I thanked him for the first time. He softly said that it was nothing. During the break, Ryan and Lucas surrounded us and mocked my sudden dedication to school. They imitated the conversations Julian and I had every day. Whenever he asked to borrow a book or a pen, I refused as if his entire house had been robbed. They teased me about my supposed crush again. I announced that I feared homosexuality and could never like a boy. Julian said that he did not believe me. I snapped that I liked his uncle instead. Ryan pointed out that his uncle was also a man. Julian solemnly informed us that his uncle had died young. Everyone collapsed with laughter. I laughed too, never noticing that Julian's ears had turned red before he escaped to the restroom. In English class, I fell asleep almost immediately. When I woke, I learned that Ms. Hannah Davis had come down personally to stare at me, which meant she would certainly report me to Mr. Hall. When worksheets moved through the room, Bella Nolan hid a love letter for Julian inside his copy. He read it, wrote a few words, returned it, and stepped outside. Less than 10 seconds later, Bella lay on her desk crying. When Julian returned, I gestured toward her and told him she was wonderful, so he should accept her. He wrote that he did not like her. Using my broken English, I asked why, because she was beautiful. He wrote that he preferred someone with a narrow waist. I immediately defended Bella. I said that he was foolish because a broad waist had more softness and would feel better to hold. Bella heard me and demanded to know what I had said. Before I could escape, she chased me around the classroom. Julian watched without helping. Cody thought we were playing and moved out of the way. As I ran, I shouted that Julian was the person who had criticized her waist and that I had been defending her. Bella stopped, turned bright red, looked at Julian, then returned to her seat and cried even harder. I sat down in relief and blamed everything on him. Julian pointed at himself in disbelief. I silently reminded him that he was the one who did not like broad waists, then told him to comfort her. Bella continued crying despite Amy Lynn trying to calm her. I worried that Mr. Hall would hear, so I kept urging Julian to do something. He clearly did not want to, but he found it difficult to refuse me. He sighed, tapped Bella's back with his pen, and told her to stop crying. She immediately became quiet, wiped her tears, and agreed. Then she returned to her worksheet as if nothing had happened. I sat beside them thinking that people in love were terrifying. Ms. Davis eventually forced Julian to tutor me through the English test. I understood almost nothing, but he explained every sentence with surprising patience. My terrible translation made Ryan and Luke laugh, and Mr. Hall entered to discover another teacher driven nearly mad by me. Mr. Hall still decided that Julian was the only student capable of helping me. He also said I understood so little about romance that the rumors connecting us did not worry him. He asked what I disliked about Julian. I forced a cheerful smile and said there was nothing. Having the top student as my desk mate made me very happy. Mr. Hall asked whether Julian still wanted to sit beside me. Before the question was finished, Julian said that he did. I raised my hand and said that I did not want to sit with him. Mr. Hall coldly rejected my objection. He told me that I could demand fairness after becoming the top student in the grade. Before leaving, he reminded me to wear an elephant to class the next day. I closed the test because I did not want Julian to continue teaching me. Half joking and half serious, he said that I was the only person he wanted to teach. I told him not to speak as if we were close. He asked whether I had always refused to become close to him. I explained that a student at the bottom of the grade and a student at the top were separated by a distance greater than his lifespan. We could never be people walking the same road. Julian smiled and reminded me that he liked games just as I did. When I ignored lessons, he did the same. I hated studying, and he claimed that he hated it too. He asked whether that was not enough to make us similar. I thought he was boasting in disguise. He said that we were not only walking the same road, we were practically family. I rolled my eyes. Julian finally explained that Lisa had worn a shirt with a panda pattern today and an elephant pattern yesterday. He gave me a dictionary and said I could look up unfamiliar words or ask him, because he would be happy to help. I said I could use my phone. He pointed out that I would probably open a game before finding the word. I admitted that games could increase my rank, while a word would be forgotten in a few days. He still wanted to explain every sentence. Then he suddenly asked whether I would refuse if Nina Taylor taught me instead. Nina was the beautiful girl from the neighboring class who had once bumped into me outside the restroom and run away blushing. I casually said that I would never refuse someone so pretty. Julian fell silent, then asked whether I thought he was not beautiful. I laughed and reminded him that he was a boy, so there was no reason to compare himself with Nina. He stood and walked away. For the next several days, he did not say a single word to me. At first, I wondered how I had offended him. Then the National Gaming Championship began, and I forgot about everything else. On Sunday night, I was waiting for Cody to send me the mathematics homework so I could copy it before Monday. A user named Snow Beneath Snow sent me a friend request and introduced himself as Julian Foster. I thought the name was ridiculous, but I accepted. I finished copying the homework and was preparing to sleep when Julian finally sent 4 words. He said that he liked me. I asked whether he had messaged the wrong person or whether his account had been stolen. He did not answer until nearly midnight. His reply said that there had been no mistake and that he was serious. That only convinced me that someone had stolen his account. The next morning, Julian sat at his desk playing a game as usual. I stuffed a whole tea egg and a bun into my mouth, then asked whether his account had been hacked. His hands stopped. He said it had not. I immediately checked the date to see whether it was April Fool's Day. Julian finally looked up. With complete seriousness, he said that he wanted me to see him differently, as more than a deskmate or classmate. My phone fell to the floor. He turned back to his screen and calmly added that if his confession made me uncomfortable, I could pretend that his account had been hacked. I picked up my phone, stared at him for a long time, and asked whether he had lost his mind. After a long silence, he said that he had lost it a long time ago. I could not understand what was wrong with the eyes of the best student in school. How could he look at someone near the bottom and decide that he liked what he saw? I concluded that he had to be joking. I pointed toward Bella and said that if he was bored, he could make that joke with her and receive a wonderful result. If he tried it with me, he might get beaten. Julian said that he did not want to joke with Bella. He only wanted to joke with me. If I wanted to hit him, he would meet me on the court after class. I warned him never to make such a joke again. Countless people were worthy of the wealthy heir of the Foster family, but I was not one of them. He remained silent for almost an hour. Just before physics, he said there was nothing unworthy about me, because I was better at physics than he was. I remembered Mr. Hall saying that university entrance examinations included more than physics. Without thinking, I said that physics was useful for nothing. Mr. Carter happened to enter through the back door and heard every word. During class, he asked whether the electric fans made us feel cool. He reminded us that before physics developed, people had no electric fans. Then he stopped beside me and quietly asked whether physics might still be useful for something. I wanted to hide under the desk. Julian laughed until his head fell onto his arms. That afternoon, Mr. Hall announced a class dinner and rejected my request to go home and play games instead. After school, Cody wanted to ride with Julian and me. I covered his mouth and dragged him away on foot. Cody asked how Julian had offended me, because I normally accepted every free advantage I could find. I insulted him and kept walking to the restaurant. Julian sat in room 1, surrounded by boys and girls. I deliberately chose room 4, the farthest place from him. A little later, he still arrived with several girls and sat directly beside me. Ryan asked why he had changed rooms. Julian answered that Ethan was here. I sprayed water from my mouth and hurried to explain that we were desk mates, so we were used to sitting together. Cody and Ryan told me not to flatter myself. I desperately hoped they were right. Bella complained that Julian did not know how to treat a girl gently. She could say 10 sentences and receive 1 word in response. Ryan said that gentleness did not suit her, and they began arguing. I laughed, so Bella called me a pig who did nothing but eat, sleep, and commit crimes while awake. I asked what crime I had committed. She suddenly announced that I liked her. According to Bella, I had criticized her waist to attract attention, encouraged Julian to comfort her because I wanted to do it myself but lacked courage, and constantly provoked her so she would chase me. These were all clumsy methods of pursuing love, but she wanted me to understand that she would never like me. Everyone at the table laughed until their bodies shook. I pulled Julian into the argument and demanded that he testify for me. Julian said he could testify. He told everyone that an outstanding person had once confessed to me, but I had refused because someone else already occupied my heart, and that person was Bella. I asked whether he had a heart or not. Bella accused me of using another cheap trick. Lucas and Chloe came over to join the fun. I tried to change the subject, but Julian said he would return to room 1 if I agreed to follow him. I felt as if lightning had struck my head. When the food arrived, Ryan, Cody, and I argued over who would pay for the beer. Cody secretly paid first. Then someone suggested a word connection game. The winner ate, while the loser drank or chose truth or dare. On my turn, Cody began with words about the class dinner. I connected them to a full dining table and reached for the food. No one accepted my answer because it made no sense. Only Julian refused to object, though his explanation began with a comment about my terrible language skills. I drank an entire glass before he could finish. On Julian's turn, he used the same answer and everyone accepted it. I protested that he had stolen my idea, but his admirers defended him. He picked up a piece of sweet and sour pork with the serving chopsticks and placed it in my bowl. Every girl at the table screamed. I demanded to know what game he was playing. He said I was hungry. I replied that I had hands and could serve myself. Julian quietly observed that even with hands, I might not manage to reach the food. I immediately threw the pork back into his bowl. Bella held out her bowl, but Julian did not move. Ryan tried next and was told to get lost. The game continued. When Valerie Wells lost, she chose truth. Someone asked whether she liked any boy in the room and what she wanted to do with him. She pointed directly at me, almost making me fall from my chair. Then her finger shifted to Julian. She announced that she liked him and wanted to kiss him deeply. The room erupted. Because I loved watching trouble, I suggested a contest. Any girl who could make Julian collapse from drinking would win the right to kiss him. All the girls agreed. Julian pulled me toward him and asked whether I realized that the joke had gone too far. I challenged him and asked whether the top student was afraid. After thinking for a moment, he smiled and said he would participate on one condition. Ethan had to participate too. Ryan thought that I would also compete for the right to kiss Julian. Julian clarified the condition. If he defeated every girl, I would have to kiss him. The room fell silent for 1 second. Then everyone shouted their approval. I jumped up to run, but Cody and Ryan caught me like prison guards. I demanded that Ryan kiss Julian himself. Ryan reminded me that I had invented the game and said Julian might not defeat everyone. That sounded reasonable. There were only 6 girls, so I ran to the other rooms and recruited 4 students with the strongest language skills. I was determined to defeat Julian with 10 opponents. Then I learned that 1 girl was allergic to beer, 1 collapsed after a single glass, and the strongest could only drink 1 bottle. I wanted to escape again, but they dragged me back. News of the contest spread, and students crowded around the doorway. Ryan increased the difficulty. The players would connect idioms instead of ordinary words. Valerie began. Julian answered immediately. She struggled to continue, but he produced another difficult expression without thinking. When she became trapped, I argued that his answer was only a phrase and not a real idiom. Julian calmly recited its definition, meaning, and historical source. Lucas checked online and shouted that every word was correct. I sat in stunned silence. The kiss I had gambled seemed to be slipping out of my hands. I had dug a hole and jumped into it myself. Valerie admitted defeat but asked what his expressions meant. Julian explained them and even cited their origins. I accused him of showing off and challenged him to recite an ancient poem. He looked at me like a fox and asked whether there would be a reward. I promised to drink a whole bottle if he succeeded. He recited the poem without missing a word and added that he had memorized it at 3 years old. I kept my promise and emptied a bottle despite his attempt to stop me. Chloe played next. She blushed whenever she looked at Julian, and even her words became soft. I urged her to use the advantage of going first. Julian responded with the most difficult expressions he knew and defeated her in 3 rounds. I asked whether he knew how to be gentle with girls. He said that he was only following my instructions. Bella stepped forward using a voice so sweet that my skin crawled. She asked Julian to be gentle because she was frightened. I casually said that I would have gone easy on her. Bella shouted at me to get lost. She reminded me that she did not like me and accused me of hinting publicly that I wanted to kiss her. I had no idea what I had hinted, so I raised my hands and retreated. When Bella faced Julian again, she returned to her sweet voice. Every idiom she chose praised his red lips, white teeth, elegant appearance, or handsome face. Julian became so embarrassed that he stared at the ceiling. I told him that he should look at her while speaking instead of studying the ceiling. He leaned toward my ear and quietly told me to prepare myself for our kiss. My ears burned. I hurried away. Despite all her flattery, Bella lost. After 3 bottles, she could barely stand, so I brought her tea. The other 7 girls failed one after another. All 10 had been defeated, and Julian had not taken a single drink. When the time came to keep my promise, I demanded a physics competition instead. Language was his strength, but physics belonged to me. Everyone looked at me with contempt because I had won the national competition. I promised that if I lost, I would complete 3 requests for Julian, as long as they were within my ability. He agreed. We would each ask 1 question. A wrong answer meant drinking, and the first person to collapse would lose. Julian began with a problem about the rotational period of a spherical celestial body. I gave the answer before he finished. I asked about types of photoelectric effects, and he answered completely. The questions became deeper and more difficult. No one around us understood anything except Greek symbols and formulas. After 2 hours, I began using problems from the final round of the national physics competition. Julian failed one and had to drink. I had consumed only 3 glasses while he had finished nearly 4 bottles. His legs trembled, but he held the table and demanded another question. I did not want to kiss him in front of everyone, so I showed no mercy. He lost repeatedly. At the 7th bottle, I realized something was wrong and tried to stop. Julian said that if I ended the game, he would count it as his victory. I had no choice but to continue. After 2 more bottles, he fell to his knees and vomited beneath the table. Even then, he stood and asked for another question. Chloe and Valerie were so worried that they cried. Chloe knelt and begged me not to make him drink anymore. I could not bear seeing someone kneel. I pulled her up, walked to Julian, grabbed his shirt, and kissed him. The entire room clapped, whistled, and demanded a deeper kiss. I reluctantly parted his lips. The taste of beer was mixed with something unexpectedly sweet. It was not as unpleasant as I had imagined, so beneath all the noise, I continued for several more seconds. When I released him, Julian stood like a piece of wood. He stared at me without managing a single word. Near midnight, everyone began leaving. The class monitor handed Julian to me, arguing that I had reduced him to this condition and therefore had to take responsibility. When the room was empty, I asked whether he could walk. He stood and nearly dropped to his knees. Caught him. To my surprise, he pushed me away and sat down again. After a long delay, he said he also wanted sobering tea. I remembered giving tea to Bella and brought him a cup with mint candy. Drunk Julian was as obedient as a child. He drank every drop and placed all the candy in his pocket. Cody sent me a message saying that the video of our kiss had flooded the class group and school forum. I watched it and sighed. I asked Julian whether I had kicked away the chair when he hanged himself in a past life, because he seemed determined to cling to me and create disaster in this one. I only wanted to play games, finish school, and tighten bolts in my family's workshop. I raised my hand to hit him, but his innocent expression stopped me. Instead, I announced that this was the final time. From that moment, we would have nothing to do with each other. The moment we reached the door, he said he needed the restroom. I guided him into a stall and waited outside. He soon returned and pointed at the drawstring of his trousers. It was tied in a knot he could not undo. I crouched to help and accidentally discovered that he had defined abdominal muscles. His face looked slender, but he had hidden his body very well. I pushed him back inside and ordered him to handle the rest by himself. While waiting, I read the class group. Some students mourned that I had defiled their perfect prince. Others accused me of deliberately asking impossible physics questions. I was angry enough to leave when Julian emerged with the drawstring still hanging loose, looking like a helpless child. I could not abandon him. I tied it, dragged him to the sink, and watched him move his hands around the stream without touching the water. I had to hold his wrists under it. I warned him to forget everything by morning or his reputation as the top student would be destroyed. Outside, I called a car. Julian took out his wallet and offered money. Contained cash and several cards, so I joked that I would steal everything. He nodded seriously. I asked for the card password. He began giving me the first number, and I immediately covered his mouth. I told him never to reveal it so easily. Only after entering the car did I realize that I did not know his address. He had already fallen asleep, so I took him home with me. His head kept falling against my shoulder. I pushed it upright twice. On the third time, even the driver advised me to let a drunk person rest, so I reluctantly allowed it. At home, I threw Julian onto my bed and took a shower. When I returned, he had not moved at all. I pulled him into a comfortable position and covered him with a blanket. He looked strangely obedient in his sleep, without any of his usual irritating arrogance. When I woke, he had already left. A short note thanked me for the night. At school, everyone stared at me as if I were an unknown creature. Ryan asked whether last night's kiss had tasted sweet. I insulted him and pretended that nothing had happened. Julian arrived after morning study, freshly showered and wearing clean clothes. He stopped beside the desk and asked me to let him pass. We attended class as usual, but an awkward tension remained between us. Mr. Hall quickly learned about the kiss. He summoned both of us and complained that a single class dinner had turned the entire school upside down. I immediately admitted my mistake and suggested changing seats so it would never happen again. Julian said that the previous night had mostly been his fault. He refused to change seats and promised to improve my grades. I asked how a person who read novels in class intended to teach me. He promised that if we continued sitting together, I would pass English in the next monthly examination. I had never passed English in 3 years. I warned that under his guidance my score might fall from the teens to a single digit. Mr. Hall said that whether I earned 19 points or 9 would not affect my chances of entering the finest universities, because those chances did not exist. He told me to stop shamelessly blaming Julian. In the end, he banned alcohol and kissing games but rejected the seat change. Back in class, I decided that I would never speak to Julian again. If I did, I was a dog. The moment he sat down, he reminded me that I owed him 3 requests. I turned my back and pretended to be deaf. He used his first request to forbid me from asking for another seat. I remained silent. Julian suddenly mentioned that I had slept restlessly the previous night and kept crawling into his arms. My entire body stiffened. I remembered waking with the smell of alcohol on my clothes and finally understood what had happened. He began saying that, after spending the night together, he liked me even more. I glared until he swallowed the sentence, then wrote 2 words on a piece of paper telling him to leave me alone. He stayed quiet for a moment and then added that he would not give up. Mr. Hall taught the next class, but he began lecturing on physics. I was angry about the seating decision, so I repeatedly raised my hand and asked him to derive the law of universal gravitation, explain another complicated theorem, and justify every step of his calculation. Mr. Hall realized that I was causing trouble. He asked whether I had found money that morning, because he had never seen me so enthusiastic. I honestly told him that deriving only 2 laws would consume the rest of the lesson. The class laughed. When Mr. Hall made a calculation error, Julian corrected him. Julian rarely seemed to listen, but he understood everything. I soon lost interest and secretly opened my phone. Julian suddenly took it. I demanded it back. He said I was not allowed to watch beautiful women. Several lightly dressed female streamers had appeared on my page. I asked what my interest in them had to do with him, then pinched his hand. We struggled beneath the desk until Mr. Hall noticed. I did not dare admit that Julian had stolen my phone, so I accused him of taking my pen. Both of us were punished and sent to stand at the back of the room. I leaned toward his ear and reminded him of the previous night. I asked which little boy needed his older brother to untie his trousers, which little boy could not tie them afterward, and which little boy nearly revealed his bank password. His ears and neck turned red. He begged me to stop. Mr. Hall saw me whispering and ordered me to derive a formula on the board. I filled the board and extended the final symbol across 1/2 meter. Then I casually derived the next law as well. Mr. Hall immediately realized that I had understood everything from the beginning and had forced him to repeat it only to cause trouble. I blamed Ryan and claimed that he had not understood. No one believed me and I returned to the back of the class. After the lesson, I ran to the restroom. When I came out and saw Julian approaching, I ordered him to meet me near the stairwell and return my phone. I asked why he had taken it. He still said that he did not like me watching beautiful women. I told him that countless people admired his appearance, so he had no reason to be jealous over a man, especially one as straight as steel. He smiled and said that perhaps I was the most outstanding person in his heart. Naturally, I agreed. After thinking about it, I could not identify anyone better than me. I demanded my phone. He asked what I would do if he refused. Without thinking, I threatened to make him cry for his parents and leave him unable to rise from bed. Julian looked away and said that in that case, he was even less willing to return it. I realized that I could not continue teasing him that way. I became serious and explained that I only liked girls. I could never like a man now or in the future. There was absolutely no possibility between us, so he should not waste his feelings. The smile disappeared from his face. After a long silence, he asked whether I truly felt nothing for him. His disappointment made my words feel cruel, but anything less direct might deepen his misunderstanding. I said that I felt nothing. He asked why I had kissed him. I turned away and pretended not to care. I said that I only kissed him because I was afraid he would drink himself to death and create trouble for me. Julian stared for a long time. In a hoarse voice, he said that he had imagined feelings that did not exist. He returned my phone and smiled sadly. Now he understood how Chloe had felt when he rejected her. I did not know how to comfort him, so I turned and walked away. Julian missed school for several days. Simon Beck said he was seriously ill and had been hospitalized. My heart sank, and I wondered whether I was responsible. My mood became so terrible that when Ryan's hair accidentally brushed my eye, I shouted at him. A week later, I entered class with fried dough in my mouth and saw Julian at his desk. His face was still pale. For once, I asked first whether he felt better. I placed warm milk in front of him and told him to drink. He accepted it and quietly thanked me. The moment he returned, the weight in my chest disappeared. Bella hurried over to ask about his health and knocked my books onto the floor. I lightly touched her elbow to make her move her arm. She screamed loud enough for the entire class to hear and demanded to know why I was touching her. I froze. Ryan collapsed onto his desk laughing. Bella stormed away to report me. Both Mr. Hall and Mr. Clark were in the office. The moment Mr. Clark saw me, he complained that a girl was not one of my male friends and I could not touch her whenever I wished. Mr. Hall seriously asked whether I had harassed Bella. I lightly touched his arm to demonstrate. I asked whether that counted as harassment. Bella had been so busy talking to Julian that she knocked down my books. I only wanted her to move. Bella insisted that no one knew whether it had been a warning or an excuse to touch her. I told her to stop admiring herself. If she looked carefully in a mirror, she would never have such thoughts. She asked whether I was calling her ugly. I said she should remove the question and accept the statement. She was ugly. Bella attacked. I caught her wrist. She shouted that I was a criminal for holding her hand. The moment I released her, her fists fell on me like rain. The two teachers watched until they finally understood. Mr. Clark told Mr. Hall to handle his own class because he refused to become involved. Bella continued glaring as we left the office. I only wanted to remain as far from her as possible. Back in class, Julian kept looking at me. I turned fully toward him and told him to take one long look. He laughed and said he only wanted to tell me that my shirt was inside out. I looked down. The picture and every seam were exposed. I had stood in front of two teachers like that. I ran to the restroom to change it. While passing class 8, Nina Taylor rushed out, pushed an envelope into my hands, and ran away with a red face. It was a love letter. I called her back, returned it, and honestly said I could not accept. She hesitantly asked whether we could become online friends. I saw no harm in adding a friend, so I agreed. The moment I returned, Ryan teased me for capturing the most beautiful girl in her grade. He said one gesture from me would bring daily hugs and kisses. Before I could answer, Julian reached into my pocket, took my phone, opened the chat application, found Nina, and deleted her. Ryan and I stared at him. Julian calmly explained that he had promised to improve my grades, which meant I was not allowed to date. I was preparing to settle the matter when Mr. Hall entered. As he approached, I immediately lifted a book and pretended to read. After he passed, I grabbed Julian's wrist and warned him never to touch my phone again. Julian quietly reminded me that the homeroom teacher was nearby. I said that even a pregnant woman could not frighten me. Mr. Hall's voice immediately sounded behind us. He asked who the pregnant woman was. I turned and saw that he had suddenly doubled back. I stammered that the phrase simply meant a woman carrying a baby. He asked why such a woman would be used to frighten me. Julian and I looked at each other and burst out laughing. Ryan and Luke laughed behind us. Bella reported that we used that nickname for Mr. Hall. He silently studied the four of us, sighed, and walked away. I later learned that he complained to Mr. Clark in the office. Mr. Clark was even more miserable because students had given him a childish dragon nickname. Heavy rain arrived that afternoon. Thunder and lightning shook the windows. Students near the glass pulled their desks toward the center of the room. Bella and Valerie had already protected Julian from the lightning. I planned to appear fearless, but when a distant tree was struck and fell, I quietly dragged my desk inward. While I slept, Ryan imitated Mr. Hall's voice and shouted my name. I woke in terror and beat him. Later, he warned me that Mr. Clark was coming. I immediately sat upright and pretended to study, only to discover another trick. I announced that if I believed him again, I was an idiot, then returned to sleep. This time, Mr. Clark actually walked past. He saw me sleeping in the most visible place and tapped my desk. Believing he was Ryan, I told him to get lost. Mr. Clark struggled to control his anger and said that this was not his seat. Still half asleep, I demanded to know where else I should sit. I asked whether he expected me to sit in his lap. He asked whether I truly dared. I stood with my book and offered to sit on his head instead. Then I saw who stood in front of me. My legs weakened, and I dropped into my chair. I spent more than half an hour listening to a lecture in the discipline office. By the time I was released, everyone had gone home. Rain still poured outside. I searched my contacts and realized there was no one suitable to call. My parents worked far away throughout the year, and I lived alone. For one moment, the empty feeling became difficult to ignore. Then I laughed at myself for becoming sentimental. I was about to run into the rain when a hand pulled me backward. Julian stood behind me. I asked why he had not left. He said he had been waiting for me. I reminded him that we did not live in the same direction. He raised a black umbrella and offered to take me home. I refused because I was not a weak girl and ran into the rain. Julian immediately followed, grabbed me, and became angry in a way I had rarely seen. He said the late autumn rain was freezing and would make me ill. He asked why sharing an umbrella was so difficult and whether I hated him that much. Something in my chest warmed. I finally agreed. A large pool of water blocked the path, with only a narrow row of stones across it. I intended to let Julian cross first because his expensive shoes probably cost more than mine. Instead, he wrapped an arm around my waist and lifted me over the water. The moment he set me down, I tried to protect my pride. My shoes were already wet, so a little more water would not matter. I accused him of showing off his strength. He calmly agreed that his arms were strong. I challenged him to an arm wrestling match and said he might not defeat me. He looked at my body and asked who someone so small expected to defeat. I demanded to know what part of me was small. Julian quickly corrected himself and said I was very large. The sentence sounded strange. I casually told him that he was not small either. His shocked expression made me realize the problem, so I hurried to clarify that I was speaking about his height. As we entered Rose Alley, Julian tilted the umbrella toward me until his own shoulder became soaked. I pushed it back and reminded him that he had just recovered. If he became sick again, he could not blame me. He pulled me close and said that I should stand nearer to him. I instinctively moved away. When I saw his shoulder getting wet, I slowly moved back. He coughed. I asked whether he was still ill. He said it was nothing. I remembered the cruel things I had said and felt regret. Julian had never forced me to do anything. Loving someone was not a crime. Perhaps one day he would meet the right person and naturally forget me. There had been no reason to destroy every trace of hope inside him. At the entrance to my apartment complex, I told him we had arrived. He remembered that I lived in Building 3, Room 502. He even joked that the number resembled the name of a strong adhesive. He offered to escort me to my door. I refused and told him to go home. He asked again, as if seeking confirmation, whether he should really leave. For one moment, I wanted to invite him upstairs for a hot shower and dry clothes. In the end, I only agreed that he should go. The next morning, school returned to its usual chaos. At lunch, Cody and I ran toward the cafeteria like hungry wolves because Class 8 had been dismissed 2 minutes early. A romantic song played over the speakers. I cursed whoever secretly loved Julian enough to select it. I arrived first, but the cafeteria worker shook the serving spoon until my piece of braised meat was reduced to vegetables. While we ate, Cody told me that Henry Cole, the leader of a neighboring school, had recently left juvenile detention and planned to stop Julian at the gate that afternoon. For the rest of the day, I secretly watched Julian. He behaved normally. I did not know whether the rumor was false or whether he knew nothing. After school, I sent Cody home and followed Julian from a distance. I feared that a wealthy boy who had never fought might be beaten to death. 5 or 6 boys with dyed hair waited near the gate. I found a wooden stick behind the guardhouse and prepared to charge. The leader approached Julian and suddenly dropped to his knees. He cried that he had finally found Julian, admitted he was wrong, and begged Julian not to ignore him. I stood frozen with the stick. Henry's followers rushed to pull him up because he was supposed to be their leader. Julian coldly told him to go home and never appear again. Henry started crying harder, but one glance from Julian made him obediently lead his people away. Julian turned, saw the stick in my hand, and smiled. He said I seemed very worried about him. I dropped it as if it were burning. I said I had only intended to stop an unfair fight, but clearly my help was unnecessary. He invited me to walk with him. Afraid that another rumor would appear the next morning, I insisted that we were going in different directions and left. Cody called while I walked and told me about Henry kneeling. He suggested that Julian was a hidden gang leader. Someone tapped my right shoulder. I looked but saw no one. Julian appeared on my left. He said he wanted to walk with the person handsome enough to shock the school committee. I reminded him that he ranked first while I was only the aftershock. I asked about Henry. Julian said that 6 people had once surrounded him, so he had beaten all 6. I asked whether he had won. He answered as if it were the most ordinary thing in the world. He had. When we reached the entrance to Rose Alley, he continued following me. I asked whether he had taken the wrong road. He said he only wanted to escort me home. I joked that after bringing me to my door, he might ask for a farewell kiss. His face turned red, but he said that he would accept one if I agreed. I hurriedly told him that he had walked far enough. That night, I played games until midnight again. The next morning, I entered class looking as if I were attending my own funeral. I fell asleep during biology. Julian reached toward my eyelashes, but I suddenly opened my eyes and caught his wrist. I asked what he was doing. He did not answer, so I released him and said he was ill. Ryan asked whether we were fighting. I said Julian had tried to attack me while I slept. During physical education, our class ran with Class 8. Nina Taylor was playing with a friend and collided with me. I caught her before she fell. My fingertips accidentally brushed her chest, but I did not even notice. Julian ran behind us and heard Nina tell her friend that I had touched her. The other girl asked whether I had done it deliberately. After 4 laps, my throat was dry. Julian approached with half a bottle of water. I held out my hand. He drank the rest in front of me, gave me the empty bottle and pointed toward the trash. I threw it back. He caught it and coldly told me that we should fight. Before I understood anything, his fist struck my face. I answered with a punch that split his lip. We fought seriously, wrestling, locking arms, lifting each other, and rolling across the ground while both classes surrounded us. Coach Scott King arrived and demanded to know why we were using the field to wipe the ground. I said Julian had attacked first. Julian claimed that he was in a bad mood. When the coach asked whether I was the reason, Julian said yes. When asked why, he only said that my face irritated him. I kicked him again. Both of us were punished and made to stand beneath the sun. After a while, I asked why he suddenly found me irritating. He remained silent, then asked what I had done with Nina and whether I liked her. I did not understand where the question came from. I asked whether liking her would be illegal. He immediately said that if I had never considered it, I should never begin. I was also forbidden from touching her. I demanded to know when I had touched her. Julian said he had heard Nina accuse me of taking advantage of her. I nearly spat blood. I swore that if I had done such a thing, I would cut off my own hand. Only then did he realize his mistake. I turned away, furious that he had mistaken me for a criminal. A boy from another school came to ask for directions. I was too angry to answer, so I pointed behind me and said there was another person who was still breathing. After the boy left, Julian apologized. He suggested that I had brushed Nina by accident and that she had misunderstood. I said that he had punched me over a girl, so perhaps he was the person who liked Nina. Julian looked at me and asked whether I did not already know whom he liked. I said I did not. He tried to confess again, so I kicked him and ordered him to close his mouth. At noon, I woke to find a bag of medicine on my desk. Julian said he had bought it because my face was badly swollen. I asked whether this was his method, 1 punch followed by 1 piece of candy. He apologized seriously. Ryan appeared and asked whether we had made peace. He advised me to treat Julian better. I pointed at my injured face and reminded him that I had been attacked. Ryan and Luke both said that if I treated Julian well, he would not need to hit me. I asked when I had ever bullied Julian. Julian turned toward the window and pressed his lips together as if he had suffered countless injustices. I could not tolerate the performance, so I slapped his shoulder. During physics, Mr. Carter saw my swollen cheek and Julian's bruised lip. He asked whom we had fought together. Ryan said that we had fought each other. Mr. Carter called us perfect examples of what students should never become. During the break, Julian brought 2 ice pops and told me to press them against my face. I was thirsty and asked whether I could eat them. He said I should wait until the swelling went down. I pressed one to my cheek and bit into the other. I thanked him after class. I separated from Cody at the entrance to the alley and was wondering what to eat for dinner when Henry Cole and nearly 10 followers blocked my path. Henry said Julian was his leader, so hitting Julian was the same as hitting him. He intended to teach me who held real power. He swung a baseball bat toward my head. I blocked it, kicked him down, and seized the bat. Because they outnumbered me, I pointed behind them and shouted Julian's name. The moment they turned, I ran. Near the main road, I stepped on a stone and fell. The pavement tore open my palms. The group caught me and dragged me up by my collar. Henry charged with the bat. Julian appeared at the end of the alley. He saw the bat falling toward my head and threw himself over me without hesitation. The bat struck his shoulder and back with a heavy sound. Julian released only a quiet groan while his arms covered me completely. Henry recognized him. His face went white. He dropped the bat and fell to his knees. Every follower knelt with him as if they had rehearsed it. I escaped from Julian's arms and asked where he had been hit. He held his left arm and shook his head through clenched teeth. Henry hurried to explain that he only wanted to help Julian punish me because I had hit him that morning. Julian kicked him down before he could finish. In a cold voice, he asked whether they would have beaten me to death if he had not appeared. Then he warned them never to involve themselves with him again. They were forbidden from touching a single hair on my head, or he would make sure they spent half their lives in prison. More than 10 boys fled. I stood in a daze. Julian usually appeared lazy and indifferent. Yet in that moment, the force of his presence felt frightening. He turned and asked whether I was injured. I stared at his arm and became angry. He was the injured person. A strike like that could not be harmless. I told him I was taking him to the hospital. The doctor examined him and found that the joint between his shoulder and arm had shifted. It was corrected, medicine was prescribed, and Julian was told not to carry anything heavy for a month. Outside the hospital, I asked whether it still hurt. He said it did not. My feelings were difficult to describe. Since childhood, I had always stepped forward to protect other people. This was the first time anyone had placed himself between me and danger. I invited Julian home for dinner and promised pork rib soup. On the way, I asked about Henry. Julian said his family had some influence and that he had used it once, though he preferred to avoid that world. I thanked him seriously. He looked uncomfortable and said no thanks were necessary. At home, I bought ribs and vegetables, placed them in a pot with ginger, and went to shower. Before I entered the bathroom, Julian asked whether my hand hurt. Only then did I remember the scratches on my palm. I said they were small and would heal by morning. After showering, I walked out wearing short sleep trousers. Julian stared until he seemed lost. I asked which television channel he wanted to watch. He immediately turned his face away. I sat beside him and asked whether he had a fever, because his eyes had become red. He suddenly stood and said he should take a shower. I told him to borrow clothes from my wardrobe. He remained in the bathroom for a strangely long time, but came out wearing his old clothes. I asked whether he ate green onions. He said he did not like them, but he could accept anything I cooked. I told him that if he disliked them, I simply would not serve them. There was no need to say something strange. During dinner, I asked what he thought after visiting my home twice. Julian considered the question and said that my legs were beautiful. I choked on the soup. The moment I stopped coughing, he repeated that they were very beautiful. I coughed even harder and threatened to throw him outside if he continued. With an innocent face, he said he could not stop himself from expressing his true thoughts. I told him to keep those thoughts inside. He said he could not contain them. After dinner, I applied medicine because the injury lay behind his shoulder. The swollen purple bruise revealed how dangerous the blow had been. My hand became gentle without conscious thought. Julian quietly inhaled. I asked whether I had hurt him. He sighed and said there was no pain. My hand only felt like the paw of a kitten scratching an itch inside his heart. I wanted to scratch his face for real. I finished the medicine and ordered him home. Before he left, I packed the remaining soup for him and told him to heat it the next day. He praised the taste. I naturally accepted the compliment and reminded him to be careful. I was closing the door when he turned back. He stood silently for more than 20 seconds. Then he said that he only wanted to look at me a little longer. I slammed the door and called his words useless, but my face became hot. After that day, most of my dislike and caution toward Julian disappeared. When he borrowed pencils, erasers, or correction tape, I gave them to him. Ryan wondered when we had become so close. He noticed that Julian already had a ruler in his desk. Julian said that he simply felt like borrowing mine. When I asked why, he smiled guiltily and claimed he had forgotten his own. I took my ruler back and banned him from borrowing anything again. A few days later, girls from another school gathered outside our window to admire Julian. They praised his appearance and grades. Their voices disturbed my sleep, so I tapped the desk and told him to remove his admirers. Julian stood and coldly asked whether they were making too much noise. The girls ran away happily while praising his voice. Bella complained that they behaved as if they had never seen a handsome boy. I casually agreed. She struck the desk and demanded to know who had invited me into the conversation. I tried to explain that I supported her, but Bella accused me of jealousy because the girls had come to see Julian and not me. I surrendered and admitted my mistake. Julian laughed and said that Bella was probably the only person in the world capable of controlling me. I sighed that women and difficult people were impossible to please. Bella immediately asked who the difficult person was. I pointed at Julian. He caught my shirt and prevented my escape. Bella became tearful and insisted that she was gentle. Everything was my fault because I constantly provoked her. I denied it, making her cry harder. Ryan advised me to accept the blame and end the disaster. I said that I was wrong and that Bella was the gentlest person in the world. She cried because I had made her lose her gentleness. Then she returned to the claim that I loved her. I refused to admit it. Mr. Clark appeared in the corridor, so I leaned toward Julian and asked him to cooperate. I asked what kind of girl he liked. He said he liked someone who smiled often. I asked about someone who cried often. He said he did not like that. Bella immediately wiped her tears, displayed all her teeth, and announced that she had only been joking. Julian and I were speechless and decided she could continue entertaining herself. After school, I was watching a film at home when Cody called and invited me to a barbecue stall. He said several beautiful girls from the other school would be there. I refused twice. Then he said Henry had arrived to cause trouble and that they wanted Julian to solve it. I placed a fruit knife in my pocket and ran over. Henry was forcing the table to buy 2 cases of beer, 20 skewers of meat, and a whole roasted pig. From a distance, I called him the boy who had once knelt in front of someone else. The moment he saw me, he shouted my name and ran. His followers disappeared with him. Everyone assumed I had defeated and recruited Henry. I had no idea why he was afraid. The girls only regretted that Julian was absent. He did not answer calls and rarely added anyone online. When Ryan asked whether I had his contact, I did not want to lie. I admitted that I did. The table reacted with shock because Julian almost never accepted friend requests. Liam mentioned the old rumor that I liked him. I became angry, and Liam drank in apology. When he tried to continue, I took the bottle and said I had only been joking. He did not need to imitate Julian and frighten people with alcohol. Everyone forced me to call Julian. I threw my phone to Ryan. The moment Julian answered, he asked why Ryan had Ethan's phone. When Ryan invited him, Julian asked whether Ethan also wanted him there. Ryan said yes, but Julian insisted on hearing it from me. I grabbed the phone and told him to come if he wanted, and remain home if he did not. He laughed, asked for the address, and said he would arrive immediately. A few minutes later, a luxury car stopped beside the road. Julian stepped out and sat beside me. Cody asked whether it belonged to his family. Julian explained that he did not want us to wait, so he had asked his father's driver to bring him. I said that arriving at a street barbecue in such a car was shameless showing off. I asked why he had not flown in on a rocket. A girl said I was jealous because I could not afford it. I admitted that selling myself might not provide enough money. Julian said he would give me the car if I wanted it. I nearly choked. I reminded him that it belonged to his father and asked why he did not give his father away as well. Julian laughed and said the older man at home could not be given away casually. Everyone began playing a hand game with drinks. Julian and I were placed on the same team. He had never played and lost repeatedly while I had to drink. When I became dizzy, I demanded control. Julian stopped me and took my glass to drink in my place. I took it back and told him not to substitute when he could not handle alcohol. Cody drank for me instead. By the end, Cody, Ryan, Lucas, and I were all drunk. Julian was assigned to take me home. He told the driver to take the little drunk ghost back to his apartment. Inside the car, I waved my arms and demanded music. By the time we arrived, I had fallen asleep. Julian carried me upstairs and placed me on the bed. When he tried to leave, I caught his hand and pulled him down over me. Half awake, I told him not to go. I touched his lips and said that I had kissed them before and liked their taste. Julian asked whether I enjoyed it. I nodded. He asked whether I wanted another kiss. I nodded again. He told me to call him my older brother, and then he would kiss me. I obeyed. He asked whether I liked my older brother, and I said that I did. Julian lowered his face and kissed me. I answered willingly. We held each other and kissed for a long time, until he finally forced himself to stop. I had already fallen asleep. He covered me with a blanket and fled as if a ghost were chasing him. The next morning, I woke with a dry throat and found myself still wearing a uniform that smelled of barbecue. The memories returned immediately. I remembered pulling Julian close, calling him my older brother, saying that I liked him and kissing him. I struck my head against the wall. The pain was nothing compared with the humiliation. At school, I wore a cap pulled low over most of my face. Ryan asked why I was wearing it indoors and whether something had grown on my face. I said I was creating a style. Julian asked whether I felt well. I looked up, saw his lips, remembered everything, and immediately lowered my head again. During the break, Cody asked what riding in the luxury car had felt like. He told everyone that when I was drunk, I often grabbed strangers and sang to them for hours. Julian suddenly said that I had not grabbed a stranger the previous night. I had only grabbed him. I interrupted and announced that drunken actions could not be treated as real. He smiled and said that he had treated them as real. Everyone demanded to know what I had done. I warned Julian with my eyes. He finally claimed that I had only forced him to sing an old opera song. Cody and Ryan laughed and immediately began performing it with Lucas. At the exact moment their hands formed dramatic poses, Mr. Hall appeared. He scolded them for singing when the monthly examination was approaching and ordered everyone to study. I laughed and struck the desk because, for once, someone else had been caught. During class, Mr. Hall ordered me to remove the cap because seeing the board mattered more than looking stylish. He reminded everyone about the examination, especially the student whose report was read in every subject except physics. I told him not to worry because I would work hard to make physics read as well. The class exploded with laughter. Mr. Hall pointed at me and warned that he would be watching. During the long break, Chloe brought in a stray kitten found behind the cafeteria. I loved cats but felt embarrassed about joining the girls, so I watched from a distance. Lucas entered with a voice loud enough to frighten the kitten. It jumped onto the window and fell outside. Fortunately, it landed on an air conditioner below. I could not stand and watch. I climbed through the window and moved downward along a drain pipe. Everyone shouted for me to stop. Julian returned, saw me outside the window, and knocked over a desk in panic. He ran forward and shouted that I had lost my mind. I calmly told him to stop jumping around and go downstairs to catch the kitten. He obeyed immediately. I reached the air conditioner, picked up the kitten, and stroked its head. Below, Julian removed his uniform jacket and stretched it into a catching net. I kissed the kitten's forehead and told it not to fear because its older brother was waiting below. I released it. Julian caught it and passed it to Cody. I began climbing upward, but rough cement cut my palm. Blood made my grip weak. Julian saw it and shouted until his voice became hoarse. He told me to jump because he would catch me. I was already halfway down, nearly 5 meters above the ground. Climbing farther would only increase the chance of slipping. A fall might not kill me, but more importantly, I trusted Julian to hold me. I called down that I was jumping and that he had to catch me. Then I pushed away from the wall, turned through the air, and fell toward his open arms. I landed directly against Julian. The impact forced him backward several steps before he fell onto the ground with me in his arms. He cushioned the fall so I was unharmed. He coughed several times but only asked whether I was injured. I pulled him upright and said my life was too stubborn to end that easily. My classmates surrounded me and checked everything from my arms and legs to my face. Their enthusiasm became so embarrassing that I escaped. Back in class, I thanked Julian for catching me. He immediately asked how I intended to thank him. Then he pretended to hear an invitation to dinner and an offer of my entire self. I pushed him onto the desk and hit him several times. Ryan and Luke entered, hurriedly pulled me away, and told Julian to stop protecting me. I wanted to ask whether they believed every fight was my fault. Then I saw Julian's gentle and innocent expression. Both of them nodded seriously. Mr. Hall rushed into the room with news that I had jumped from the building. I corrected him and said I had climbed down. He said climbing from the 3rd floor was no different. Saving the kitten mattered, but my life also mattered to my family and friends. I could not allow excitement to replace thought. I knew I had been reckless, so I listened obediently. Chloe adopted the kitten. Julian quietly took my hand, sprayed disinfectant on the cut, and placed medicine and bandages on the desk. He said he had just bought them from the medical room. Warmth spread through me. The story of the rescue traveled across the school. Even Principal Martin commented that he could not encourage my method, but he admired my heart. After school, I promised to buy Julian dinner. Then Cody appeared and invited me to join a game team. I smiled apologetically, said I owed Julian a meal another day, and escaped to the internet cafe. Our team lost so many times that we began questioning our lives. At the moment of greatest despair, Julian appeared behind us and asked to try. He claimed he did not play often, yet his ranking was near the highest level. I controlled the center lane while he moved through the field. He stayed near me throughout the match, saved me from every danger, and defeated anyone who approached. An opponent demanded to know whether the player protecting the mage was her husband. We won in less than 15 minutes, and I received the best score. Doug Bennett immediately invited Julian to join the team. I refused for him. Julian was the top student and had important examinations ahead. He should not spend every day at an internet cafe. Doug asked whether I was Julian's mother and why I controlled him. I admitted that it had nothing to do with me. Julian calmly said that he listened to Ethan. Everyone looked at me as if I had cast a spell on him. I happily told him to study obediently and stop visiting the cafe. Julian agreed. He still remained long enough to help us win 3 more matches. The opposing captain arrived in person to find the player who had defeated him. When he realized it was Julian, his attitude became as gentle as a puppy. His family business depended on the Foster family, the wealthiest household in the city. The connection removed all the excitement from the competition. I pulled Cody away and refused Julian's offer of a ride. The second monthly examination exposed the same contradiction in me. I was the only student in school with a perfect physics score, but literature gave me 18 points and mathematics produced a curve so terrible that the teachers displayed it as a joke. Mr. Hall ordered me to improve. Julian reminded me that I still owed him dinner and 3 requests, so I offered a cafeteria meal, expecting him to refuse. He accepted immediately. The food contained more vegetables than meat. Julian worried that I lacked nutrition and placed his best pieces in my bowl. I proudly showed him the one thin strand left on my own tray. When I tried to give it to him, he caught my hand and ate directly from the chopsticks I had used. He slowly said it tasted sweet. My face burned. Julian said my blush revealed more than a long conversation. I carried my tray to the farthest table, but he followed and said an invited guest could not be abandoned by his host. That afternoon, a transfer student named Annie Stone joined our class. She had heard about my physics scores and asked to sit beside me. Mr. Hall refused because Julian was already tutoring me, so Annie received a nearby seat. She placed strawberry yogurt on my desk and called it a gift. Julian took it before I could answer and said he would accept on my behalf. Bella warned Annie not to trust my appearance and repeated several old insults. Julian immediately defended me. He said I had never held improper intentions toward Bella and ordered her never to attach those words to me again. Bella cried and apologized. I pulled Julian toward the stairwell and asked why he had frightened her. He moved close, touched my cheek, and asked whether I blamed him for driving people away from me. I said he had protected me and deserved thanks. His finger brushed the corner of my mouth, and for one dangerous moment, I wanted to kiss him. Back in class, Bella offered sincere friendship. Annie quietly admitted that she admired me, while Julian stared at his game with an expression that revealed another wave of jealousy. 1 week later, the cafeteria changed completely. The meals became abundant, the servers stopped shaking meat from their spoons, and the beef outnumbered the potatoes. Cody said an anonymous benefactor had funded a new library on one condition: the school also had to improve student meals. I immediately thought of Julian. He had eaten cafeteria food with me the previous week, and now it resembled a feast. After lunch, I ran back and asked whether he was responsible. He denied it without concern, then called me closer, held my chin, and cleaned the corner of my mouth with a wet tissue. He told me to use one after eating because a dry tissue did not clean properly. I protested that he was using the same tissue that had touched my mouth. He calmly wiped his own lips with it and said he did not mind. I threw it away and emphasized that I was the person who minded. I asked again whether he was the benefactor. Julian leaned close as if revealing a secret, then still denied any connection. I did not believe a word. When Ryan and Luke returned discussing the food, I mentioned eating 2 shrimp dishes. Julian learned that I loved seafood, while he was allergic. He said that at least we would never fight over seafood in the future. I hurried to explain that he only meant he would not steal from me if we ate together again. The boys behind us said I understood Julian so well that I would probably take his entire bowl. I beat Ryan. Annie arrived and asked whether I needed help. She accidentally mispronounced Ryan's name as something insulting, making the class laugh until no one could breathe. Lucas declared himself the most dangerous man in the world to attract her. He approached like a criminal and asked for a kiss. Annie kicked him between the legs. He fell and cried about his future children. She pointed at me and said she preferred someone charmingly bad like Ethan. Julian usually ignored such games, but he stood, leaned against my desk, and announced that her Ethan already had someone in his heart. She should stop liking him. The entire class demanded to know who it was. Afraid Julian would reveal something earth-shaking, I jumped up and invented a girl from the other school. I said I had told Julian by accident. Lucas guessed Amy Lane, who had once sat beside me at the barbecue stall. I did not remember her, but I nodded anyway. Ryan looked shocked and asked why I liked a girl. I laughed. I was a boy, so liking girls was normal. Did he expect me to like a man? Luke said he did not know whether I liked any girl, but he knew many boys probably liked me. Julian nodded and said I was beautiful. I told him to get lost. Annie asked with red eyes whether I truly loved Amy. I reluctantly said that I probably did. She wished me happiness with the person I wanted and ran into the corridor. After everyone left, I grabbed Julian's shirt and pushed him against the wall. I asked whether he wanted the class to know that he liked me. He was not frightened. He asked what would happen if they knew. I angrily said that I did not like him and wanted no confusing relationship. I only wanted to graduate peacefully, so he had to stop creating trouble. He asked in a hoarse voice what I would do if he refused. The pain in his face resembled the first time I rejected him. This time, my own chest hurt so sharply that I could not continue. I finally said there would be no punishment. He only needed to keep his feelings private and prevent others from learning. Julian lowered his eyes and said he understood. I immediately wanted to withdraw the words, saying I did not like him. That afternoon, I had skipped my nap and slept through literature. I dreamed aloud about giant crabs and onions until Mr. Hall asked whether I intended to share the crabs with him. I became silent again. When I woke, he ordered me to call my parents. A student with 18 points in literature had no right to sleep so peacefully. I said my father worked far away. Mr. Hall called him in front of the class. My father heard that I had failed everything except physics and laughed. He said I resembled him except that he had once passed mathematics. He admitted that studying could not be forced. At worst, I could return to the family workshop after graduation. He also explained that my mother held first place in the household, I came last, and he stood beneath both of us. He could not control me. Mr. Hall called my mother instead. The moment she heard the word school, she begged him not to discuss books because she had graduated and never wanted to touch one again. She still told him to punish me because I had certainly stayed awake playing games. A moment later, she warned him not to punish me too severely because I was a good child and she could not bear my suffering. Mr. Hall surrendered and ordered me to write a 2,000-word improvement plan. Bella unexpectedly gave me medicated oil and suggested applying it to my temples when sleepy. I wondered whether someone had replaced her soul. Annie invited the entire class to a dinner that evening. I refused because of the 2,000-word plan. She promised to write it for me if I attended. The moment a student with a language score above 130 accepted the task, I agreed. She invited Julian as well. I expected him to refuse, but he accepted. Nearly 40 people arrived that night after hearing that Julian would attend. I refused alcohol to avoid another lecture from Mr. Hall. Julian came late because he had delivered urgent papers to his father. The moment he entered, the room applauded as if welcoming a celebrity. Luke deliberately seated him beside me. Because of our argument at noon, we remained distant. Our friends demanded that we shake hands and make peace. I touched his fingertips and withdrew. The room rejected such a weak effort. Annoyed, I stood, took Julian's hand, threaded all our fingers together, and raised them for everyone to see. I asked whether they were jealous because they could never have the same thing. Everyone shouted that they were jealous. When no one was watching, Julian tightened his hand and refused to release me. I quietly told him to let go. He said I had chosen to lock our fingers and that once locked, they could not separate. I used my free hand, pulled, and even bit his wrist, but nothing worked. A tissue fell between his legs. I reached down to pick it up and accidentally grabbed him in a very wrong place. Both of us froze. I withdrew my hand as if shocked by electricity. Julian finally released me, and his ears became red enough to bleed. I pretended to remain calm and reached for a shrimp. The chopsticks shook until it fell onto the table. Everyone began another word game. I tricked Ryan with a series of simple equations, then suddenly asked what my first question had been. He gave the first equation, but the real first question had asked how he felt about mathematics. I claimed the piece of cake as my prize. Ryan begged Julian to defend him. Julian looked at me and said that he liked it. For 1 second, I thought he had confessed in front of the room. Fortunately, everyone believed he meant the trick. The next game produced an embarrassing sentence about me. I wanted to strike my head against the table. When the sentence shifted to Julian, it ended with a description of his lips. The final word fell to me. I had kissed those lips twice and knew their taste better than anyone. I could not admit that in front of the room, so I accepted defeat. Everyone voted for me to perform an old opera song with dramatic hand movements. I dragged Julian into the punishment and said that since he sang well, he should perform the male part of a famous duet. The girls immediately demanded to see him sing and perform the delicate gestures. Under the pressure of the entire room, Julian agreed on the condition that I sing seriously. We stood in the center and performed a song about two birds becoming a pair and a married couple returning home together. I was forced to sing the female part while Julian answered with the male lines. We had to look into each other's eyes and follow the movements. At first, I only felt embarrassed. As the song continued, his gaze became deeper. When we reached the line about husband and wife going home together, the atmosphere changed so completely that I no longer dared to look at him. Everyone recorded us and shouted that we looked perfect together. After the dinner, people left one by one. Julian and I still had not spoken properly. When I saw him walking alone behind the others, I stopped at Rose Alley and waited. He asked why I had not gone home. I said I was not sleepy and sat on a stone beside the wall. Since neither of us was tired, I invited him to watch the stars with me. He stood beside me and agreed. I watched him for so long that he smiled and asked whether stars were growing on his body. I asked when he had begun liking me. Julian said it might have started long ago. Even he could not identify the exact moment. He only knew that the closer he moved, the harder it became to look away. I asked whether loving another boy felt strange. He said the person he loved was me, and my gender did not matter. I did not understand why I deserved such feelings. Julian said he liked watching me play basketball, fight, sleep in class, lose my temper, and do foolish things. Every version of me seemed adorable to him. His words made my skin tingle and my heart race. He promised to keep his feelings inside as I had asked. He would never force me to answer. He only hoped he could stay beside me. I asked what he would do if I loved someone else one day. After a long silence, he said he would wish me happiness, though it would probably hurt more than he could bear. My chest tightened. I admitted that Amy Lane was not real. I had invented the story to stop him from confessing in front of the class. Julian asked whether that was true. I said I could not even remember Amy's face. His smile returned immediately. Silence settled around us. I looked at his lips without meaning to and remembered our 2 kisses. Julian slowly lowered his face and softly asked whether he could kiss me. My reason told me to refuse, but my body remained still. When only a breath remained between us, I did not move away. His lips touched mine with extraordinary gentleness. It was completely different from the chaotic kiss created by a bet and the drunken kiss I barely remembered. This time I was fully awake. I felt his breath, his warmth, and the racing beat inside both our chests. Panic finally overwhelmed me. I pushed him away, stepped back, and ran from the alley. Julian remained beneath the moonlight with his fingers against his lips. I stayed awake until 5 in the morning and did not wake until 10. By the time I reached school, I had missed 2 lessons. Fortunately, Julian's seat was empty. I had just begun breathing normally when Annie gave me the improvement plan she had written. More than 2,000 words of perfect language. Julian returned soon afterward and stood beside the desk. His eyes were so gentle that my heart became disorderly again. I carried the plan to Mr. Hall and explained that I had attended the dinner and overslept. He read the plan and immediately became suspicious. It promised scores above 120 in language, mathematics, and English, with more than 90 in every science. I argued that people needed dreams. Mr. Hall pointed out that my handwriting was wild and enormous, while the writing before him was small and neat. Once exposed, I admitted that I did not know how to write such a plan. He abandoned the 2,000-word punishment and told me to choose one subject for genuine improvement. I selected mathematics and proposed raising my score from the 20s to 50. He changed the target to 70 and warned that failure would move my desk directly in front of his platform. I returned to class looking as if I were attending a funeral. Ryan gave me a strawberry lollipop. I asked whether it was another product that caused gas before tasting it. Julian had a grape lollipop but did not seem interested. I asked which flavor he liked. He said strawberry. I removed the candy from my mouth and jokingly offered it. Julian held the stick and placed the candy I had just tasted into his own mouth. I stared as he calmly enjoyed the strawberry. Only one thought remained in my head. That candy had been inside my mouth. I looked around in alarm and asked whether he wanted to die. He should not eat something that had been in someone else's mouth. He removed it, held it toward me, and offered to return it. I struck his hand, took the grape candy from the desk, and opened it for myself. I said all candy was the same. Julian calmly concluded that mine tasted sweeter. During the final mathematics lesson, Mr. Young asked me to solve a geometric sequence. I had not listened and produced 108 even though the entire problem contained only 56. Mr. Young asked whether a person 178 centimeters tall could have legs 3 meters long. I heard Cody whisper 32 from below the platform, wrote it immediately, and was allowed to return. Mr. Young called Cody to solve another problem. Cody calculated that his grandmother walked at 900 kilometers per hour. Mr. Young stared in horror and asked whether his grandmother was an airplane. I rolled into the aisle laughing until Julian pulled me upright. After school, Cody chased me because he had rescued my answer and I had still laughed at him. I escaped into the restroom and entered at the exact moment Julian was using it. I turned away. He finished and asked whether I had seen anything. Remembering the accidental touch at dinner, I said I had already touched him, so there was no reason to fear my eyes. His ears turned red. He said the situation was unfair because he had never touched me. I stopped that dangerous conversation and told him to leave when he was finished. He innocently asked whether my presence was preventing him. I admitted that I could not continue while someone watched. Julian looked at me meaningfully and agreed not to look for the moment. I warned him that the moment would last for the rest of his life. At the cafeteria, I continued teasing Cody about his airplane grandmother. We also discussed the suddenly excellent food. I thought of Julian again. If the library and meals truly came from his money, I might need a lifetime to repay the debt. My stomach became uncomfortable after eating, so I returned to the restroom. 2 boys in nearby stalls were discussing the rumor that Julian liked me. They called him pathetic for ignoring countless beautiful girls and following a pale boy who did not love him. The insult made me furious. I finished, struck the door beside me, and ordered the boy out. The moment he appeared, I punched him and demanded to know whom he had called pathetic. He hit my eye and said the insult had been directed at Julian, so it had nothing to do with me. That made me even angrier. We fought across the tiled floor until security and Mr. Clark separated us. I returned to class after another lecture with one eye purple and swollen. The moment Julian saw me, he pulled me up and demanded to know who had done it. His hand trembled near the injury without daring to touch. I pushed him away and said that this matter did not concern him. The swelling looked worse the next morning, so I wore dark glasses. Cody met me on the road and asked whether I was preparing to become a celebrity. Then he told me that Trevor Lane, the boy I had fought, had been dragged into an alley the previous night by one person in a white mask and 5 people in black masks. Trevor had been beaten badly enough to enter the hospital. The person with a golf club warned that if he ever approached me again, he would lose more than half his life. I immediately thought of Julian. He normally appeared elegant and quiet, but when he dealt with Henry, he had seemed like another person. I hoped the white-masked figure was not Julian. I did not want him near anything dangerous. In class, he sat reading like someone with no connection to violence. I convinced myself it could not have been him. The moment he saw me, he tried to remove my glasses and inspect the injury. He also reminded me about the follow-up visit to the medical room. Mr. Hall ordered me to remove the glasses during class because they attracted so much attention that no one listened. I took them off and said I only wanted to avoid frightening people. For once, he praised me. Even with a swollen face, I was not too ugly. I thanked him. He added that I would be perfect if my report looked as good as my face. I became silent. At noon, the doctor confirmed that my eye was unharmed and cleaned the wound. I asked to sleep on the examination bed. I had barely closed my eyes when Julian entered and asked for the result. I said that injuries like this happened several times every year and told him to leave if he had no other business. He remained and asked whether I had fought because I heard someone insulting him. I denied it and said that I simply hated people with filthy mouths. Before I finished, Julian pulled the curtains around the bed. He placed his hands on either side of me, lowered his face, and asked whether he already occupied a place in my heart. I reminded him that we were in the medical room and ordered him to move. He asked whether I liked him and gently touched the bruised skin near my eye. He said that learning I had been hurt while defending him had nearly destroyed his self-control. I struggled, but he held my wrists. Julian glanced toward the entrance and proposed that one kiss would earn my freedom. I called him shameless and refused. He said that he had become addicted after our first kiss and would suffocate if he continued resisting. I told him to suffocate. He pulled me closer by the waist, making my face burn. Footsteps sounded outside. I panicked and told him to release me, but he did not fear being discovered. With no other choice, I rose and bit his lip, then asked whether he was satisfied. The footsteps moved away. Julian touched his lip and said that if the person was not entering, our kiss should have lasted longer. He lowered his face again. The kiss stole my breath until I bit him and escaped. With a red face, I ordered him to remain far away and left. For the rest of the afternoon, I refused to look at him. Even when he took a pen from my pocket, I ignored him. The next day, I still kept my back toward him. During chemistry, he passed me a note saying he was wrong and would never behave that way again. He asked for forgiveness. I ignored it. He added that he would never make me uncomfortable when other people were present. That sounded as if he still had permission when we were alone, which made me angrier. Another sentence appeared on the paper. I read it, covered it with black ink, crushed the note, and threw it at his head. Julian laughed because I had finally looked at him. After class, Ryan asked why my face was red. Julian caught my hand, turned me around, and studied me. He agreed that I was very red and said that perhaps I was not the only person affected by our kiss. I nearly lost my mind and dragged him out of the classroom by his collar. Ryan and Luke tried to follow, but Julian said it was a matter between the two of us. On the field, I pushed him away and demanded to know whether he was playing with me. He had forced a kiss the previous day and used improper words today. Julian sincerely apologized for the medical room. He said everything he had written that day was true and had been spoken only to me. I angrily said that if the school learned he liked me, the hatred of every student could drown me. People were already speaking behind our backs because we had sung one duet. If we actually dated, the consequences were impossible to imagine. The distance between us came not only from other people's judgment but also from our families. His family possessed enormous wealth and expected a suitable marriage. I was not worthy. Julian asked why someone as confident as me would believe that. I gave a bitter laugh. Too much confidence became arrogance, and arrogance sometimes concealed insecurity. Standing beside Julian awakened the insecurity I had always hidden. It made me hate myself. I also hated him for making the carefree Ethan Hayes feel small. Without Julian, no one would call me a failing student, a pretty empty face, or a frog reaching for a swan. I could attend class, play games, and laugh without thinking about whether I deserved anyone. Julian lowered his head and asked what I wanted him to do. I closed my eyes and told him to stay away from me, as far away as possible. He agreed, then asked one final question. If he had been an ordinary girl like Nina or Annie, could we have been together? I stepped closer and firmly said no. Despair entered his eyes. I sighed and added that the reason was simple. I had recently realized that my heart could be drawn to a boy. The previous night, I had dreamed about our moment in the medical room. In the dream, I had not resisted him. I had wanted him closer. I woke knowing that the problem had never been his gender. The problem was my fear of what wanting Julian meant. That dream was also why his note made my face turn red. I wanted to push Julian away, but seeing his pain weakened me enough to admit the truth. He asked how I had discovered it. I told him that the answer was none of his business and returned to class. I warned Ryan and Luke never to connect my name with Julian's again. During literature, my thoughts were so distant that I misread a famous poem and accidentally described myself as buried in a low grave. The class roared with laughter. Mr. Hall made Julian read the passage correctly. The familiar jasmine scent reached me as he stood. I secretly watched the line of his face and hurriedly looked away before he noticed. During physical education, I twisted my ankle while playing basketball. Cody took me to the medical room and asked Julian to care for me. Julian only answered that he understood. His coldness was exactly what I had demanded, yet it made breathing difficult. He had once worried over me with trembling hands. Now he had truly become distant. I told myself to treat him as a stranger. A few days would make it normal. When I limped back into class, I stepped on a pen and slid directly into Julian. My lips brushed from his cheek to his neck. Both of us froze. I hurried upright. He gently reminded me to be careful, then asked how I would return home and whether he could take me. I refused and said Cody would help me after school. I limped away with Cody. When I looked back, Julian still stood in the third-floor corridor watching. That single gaze filled the emptiness inside me. Cody then mentioned the enormous distance between the wealthiest family in the city and ordinary people like us. The weight returned to my chest. A black car waited at the gate. The driver said someone had sent him. At the same moment, Julian messaged that he had arranged the ride for me. Inside, I opened our conversation history. I reread the 2 messages saying that he liked me and had not sent them by mistake. The first time I had felt nothing. Now my heart raced. I opened the profile of Snow Beneath Snow. The page was empty except for one line. He wanted to watch the snow and sunset with the person he loved. My throat tightened and my eyes became painful. I insulted myself for feeling moved, then sent a message thanking him. He replied that it was nothing. My mother returned that weekend. She saw my swollen ankle and bruised eye and worried enough to buy ribs for soup. I claimed that my face had struck a door, so she would not learn about the fight. Logan Fields helped her carry groceries from the market. He politely apologized for failing to recognize my importance earlier. Since I was Julian's friend, I was also his friend. My mother asked who Julian was. I said he was only an ordinary classmate. I stayed home for 2 days to recover. On Monday morning, the same black car waited downstairs. Julian had quietly arranged it again. At school, I sat beside him. He wore a white jacket and looked so beautiful that I dropped my pen while reaching for a book. We both bent to retrieve it. Our hands touched, and we raised our faces at the same time. From that distance, I could see every dark eyelash and the black depth of his eyes. I forgot to move. Julian leaned slightly closer and quietly warned that if I continued looking at him that way, he would be unable to resist kissing me. I sat straight immediately. My heart raced, but I forced a cold expression and thanked him for retrieving the pen. When he asked about my ankle, I only said it was much better. The morning passed peacefully. At noon, I returned from lunch and found his seat empty. I lay down, but every good thing Julian had done filled my mind. I became so irritated that sleep was impossible. Mr. Hall had set a mathematics target of 70 points. Desperate for distraction, I decided to visit the bookstore. I wanted an exercise book with detailed solutions. The second floor was nearly empty. Julian lay asleep on a sofa with a book covering his face. I had come for mathematics, yet my feet carried me toward him. My eyes remained fixed on the lips I had kissed. Remembering their softness, I swallowed and bent closer. I pressed my lips gently against his. The book slipped away. Julian had already opened his eyes and was watching me. I retreated in panic and claimed there had been a fly on his mouth. Julian asked whether I had used my lips to chase it away. The excuse was so foolish that I wanted to strike my head against the shelf. Before I invented another, Julian pulled me onto his lap, wrapped his arms around my waist, and lightly bit my lip. He asked whether I still intended to lie and whether I had missed him. The emptiness of the previous days disappeared. I stopped struggling, closed my eyes, and nodded. He kissed me again and praised me for finally having a heart. I squeezed his cheeks and complained that his teasing had filled my entire mind with him. I demanded to know where he had learned such methods. Julian said every word came honestly from his heart. He asked whether my mind truly contained only him. I immediately denied it. He smiled and shifted until I lay against the sofa. I reminded him that the bookstore had cameras. Julian said the cameras covered the shelves but not the sofa. He had checked the moment I sat on his lap. I looked at him and finally asked why he treated me so well. He kissed my palm and said it was because he loved me. I asked how he could look so beautiful. He asked whether I liked what I saw. This time I admitted that I did. Julian kissed me for a long time, then said I was even more beautiful. My eyes spoke, and every glance revealed happiness, sadness, attachment, desire, and longing. I joked that my mouth must be unnecessary. He touched the corner of my lips and said it was very necessary. My smile often carried away his soul. His sweet words left me helpless. I asked again where he had learned them. Julian seriously said he had never used them on a girl. They belonged only to me, and he would never say them to anyone else. I confessed that after our argument, I had lost focus so badly that I twisted my ankle. He had behaved like a stranger while I suffered. Julian apologized immediately, kissed me, and asked me never to order him away again. I had only intended to tease him. Seeing his guilt made me regret it, so I admitted that the apology should come from me. He said that if I feared rumors, he could love me quietly. As long as I did not drive him away, he would follow me to the edge of the world. There was no reason for me to feel inferior. In his eyes, I was extraordinary. I could defeat him with alcohol, ask physics questions he could not solve, attract crowds while playing basketball, and earn the affection of teachers and friends. Sometimes he only dared to watch from far away. He had even wished to become a girl so he could stand beside me openly. I had never imagined that someone as perfect as Julian could also feel small beside me. He had never pushed me away because of that feeling. I had felt only a little discomfort and still wounded someone who loved me sincerely. I wrapped my arms around his neck and seriously proposed that we date. For once, Julian stumbled over his words. He asked whether I truly agreed to become his boyfriend. I nodded twice. His eyes became red. He buried his face against my neck for a long time, then warned that I could never regret my answer. I said even married couples could divorce. If he stopped wanting me one day, I could not cling to him forever. Julian promised that he would never stop wanting me. He kissed me until my lips became visibly swollen. Back in class, Ryan asked whether a dog had bitten me. Julian's face darkened. I laughed until my shoulders shook, and Ryan threw food into my mouth to stop me. I opened the mathematics exercise book I had bought. I misunderstood the label for sample problem and innocently asked whether exercises also had genders. Julian sprayed water across the desk. He explained that a sample problem represented a central pattern that could produce many similar questions, then called me an idiot. Embarrassed, I challenged him to mental calculation. In the first round, we solved a 6-digit multiplication problem at nearly the same moment. In the next, we created calculations using 9-digit numbers. Within 5 seconds, I wrote the answer correctly to 2 decimal places. Julian hid his face in his hands and said the defeat was too humiliating to continue. I bent beneath his arms and asked whether he still dared to laugh at my question about the book. He caught my head and kissed my already swollen lips. Then he quietly said that his boyfriend was brilliant and made him very proud. I leaned close and said my boyfriend was also brilliant. Julian stroked my hair and made a daring promise about our distant future. My face burned. I turned toward the exercise book and pretended to study. I failed to finish even one problem because I spent the lesson watching game videos. At the end, I blamed Julian for not supervising me. He helplessly decided that neither of us could use a phone during study. The moment mine announced a message, I picked it up and smiled. Lucas arrived and said Amy Lane waited in the corridor because she believed I liked her. I still could not remember who Amy was. Lucas accused me of changing my heart after only a few days and forced me outside. Amy had only come to ask where Julian was. I called him out and introduced them. She gathered her courage and confessed to Julian. He immediately took my hand and apologized to her. He already had someone he loved. Amy was disappointed but wished him happiness with that person. Back in class, I asked whether he regretted rejecting such a beautiful girl. He said he felt nothing and asked whether I was disappointed because she had not confessed to me. I casually said that I was slightly disappointed. Julian pulled me against him, squeezed my cheeks, and demanded to know how much slightly meant. I teased that surely I still had the right to like someone else in the future. He held my face with both hands and asked who else I wanted to like. Annie returned and saw us. She immediately defended me and asked why Julian was bullying Ethan. I said we were only joking. She wondered why we had been cold the previous week and had suddenly made peace. I almost revealed the medical room kiss. Julian covered my mouth, so I invented a story about him kissing the doctor against the doctor's will. I had fought him for justice, only to discover later that the doctor had been examining his teeth and everything was a misunderstanding. Annie believed every word and praised me as a hero. Julian could only remain silent. During English, Ms. Davis made us practice giving directions. Julian asked for the way to the library. Even after he explained the meaning, I did not know how to answer and suggested that he find it himself because we were already inside the school. Ms. Davis laughed and instructed me to say that he should turn left at the next intersection. I immediately said that I did not know. Julian answered for me and received the task of tutoring me. When he leaned close to explain, I smelled the familiar jasmine scent. I checked the room and quickly kissed his cheek. I said he smelled too good for me to resist. Julian quietly warned that if I continued tempting him, he might forget that we were in a classroom. I admitted my mistake but praised the way his white shirt looked. He said he had dressed carefully because of me and wanted to know whether he could attract even one glance. I admitted that he had succeeded. Julian leaned toward my ear and promised that one day I would love him beyond reason. After school, I touched the muscles beneath his shirt, declared them impressive, and ran ahead. At Rose Alley, Julian pulled me into a corner and introduced himself as my boyfriend. He pressed me against the wall and asked who had behaved like a shameless flirt in class. I warned that someone might see us. He did not care. He admitted that every rumor connecting our names made him secretly happy. I said it was enough for us to like each other. The whole world did not need to know. The words about liking each other made him kiss me until I could barely breathe. I asked him not to continue there. He reluctantly stopped, asked whether I was hungry, and offered dinner. I deliberately provoked him again with another kiss. The moment he tried to answer, I escaped. Julian chased me all the way home. I could not close the door fast enough. Pillows, blankets, and stuffed animals failed to stop him from catching me on the sofa. I proposed negotiations and argued that violence solved nothing. We should eat first and discuss the issue later. Julian gently said he wanted one taste of me before the meal. His kisses left me weak, but he stopped the moment I asked. We went outside for street food. Julian wanted to pay. I said I had my own money. He stopped and looked wounded. He asked whether I still did not truly see him as my boyfriend. To Julian, spending money on his boyfriend was natural. The money did not come entirely from his parents because he had already helped the family business earn enough to support me. I felt moved but also frightened by the weight of a promise reaching so far into the future. When I tried to refuse, he held my hand. Spending money on me was his privilege as my boyfriend, and I had no right to take it away. I finally allowed him to buy grilled rice cake, meat pastries, sweet tofu, and milk tea. His stomach was weak, so he avoided oily food. I said he was missing something wonderful. Julian watched me and smiled. He was not hungry for food. He only wanted me. At the familiar grilled squid stall, the owner looked at us and said we resembled a married couple. I called the older man improper. Julian could not stop smiling. After we ate, Julian cleaned my face with a wet tissue. We separated at the intersection. After walking several steps, he turned, cleared his throat, and asked for a farewell kiss. Beneath the trees and streetlights, we kissed for a long time. Neither of us knew that someone had taken photographs. The next morning, everyone stared and whispered as I entered school. A crowd surrounded the notice board. Photographs of Julian and me kissing covered the entire surface. Mockery struck from every direction. Students asked why Julian would like me. They called me a male fox, a failure, and an ugly frog reaching for a swan. Some said my perfect physics score had to be stolen. I tore down every photograph, but the school forum already contained images clear enough to show every eyelash. The comments felt like blades entering my chest again and again. The thing I feared most had happened. I did not know how to face teachers or students. I lacked the courage to continue toward my classroom. The morning bell rang and the crowd slowly dispersed. I looked down the familiar road and saw monsters waiting at the end. I chose to run. I left the school, passed Rose Alley, returned home for my identification, and took a car to the station. I called my mother. The moment I said that I wanted to leave school, I began crying. She asked what had happened. I only said I was traveling to Easton, where she worked. She cried too, but immediately agreed. If I could not remain at that school, I would never need to return. She told me to be careful and promised to wait at the station. From the train, I watched the city move away. I told myself that I was safe and had escaped every voice. Half an hour later, my phone filled with notifications. I did not dare open any of them. I could not ignore a message from Snow Beneath Snow asking where I was. With shaking hands, I told Julian that we should break up and end everything. I deleted him from my contacts and turned off the phone, as if that could erase the morning. At school, Julian and Cody checked the security cameras and discovered that Trevor Lane had posted the photographs. When Julian received my breakup message, his legs nearly failed beneath him. He ran to Mr. Hall's office to explain, only to learn that my mother had withdrawn me from school. Mr. Hall asked whether we truly loved each other. Julian lost control and admitted everything in front of the teachers. He loved Ethan Hayes. Every mistake belonged to him. Ethan had never wanted him. Julian had shamelessly refused to let go, so anyone who wanted to condemn someone should condemn him. Then he found Trevor's address, called for motorcycles, and joined 5 people chasing Trevor's car toward the highway. Trevor finally understood that the figure in the white mask had been Julian. Terrified, he urged the driver to move faster. After a tunnel, Julian's motorcycle leaned too far into a curve. He was thrown away from it and rolled across the road. Cody reached him and found him motionless. Blood escaped beneath his helmet and stained his white jacket before the ambulance arrived. Cody called me 5 times before I answered. He cried that Julian had been in an accident, that blood covered him, and that he might be dead. I had just stepped from the train at Easton. My face lost all color. The phone fell and its screen shattered. Something inside my mind seemed to break with it. The station spun, darkness covered my sight, and I collapsed on the platform. I woke in an Easton hospital and immediately returned to Julian. By the time I arrived, he had left the emergency room for intensive care. He lay motionless behind glass, an oxygen mask over his face and bandages across his body. For 3 days and nights, I sat outside without eating. I drank a little water and continued watching him. One thought repeated without mercy. My cowardice had pushed him onto that road. On the 4th morning, Julian entered a normal hospital room. The doctor said the injury to his brain was severe. He might wake in days, months, or years. He might never wake. I sat beside his bed. My tears had nearly disappeared, but the pain had turned my heart numb. His father, Michael Foster, invited me into the corridor. Julian had lost his mother at 9 years old. Afterward, he became so lonely that no one truly entered his world. Michael explained the library and cafeteria. Julian had used a bank card left by his mother and asked his father to build the library and improve the food. Before her death, his mother had told him that if he ever met someone as important as she was, he should use that money for that person. I covered my face and cried until my body shook. Michael asked whether that person was me. Then he gently said Julian had loved me more deeply than I understood. I apologized and blamed myself for the accident. He said I could not carry that blame. Fate had been cruel to both of us. Then he asked why I remained if we had broken up. I shook my head immediately. I had never stopped loving Julian. I loved him completely. Only a few days earlier, I had finally realized that the feeling had entered my bones. With red eyes, Michael smiled and touched my hair. His son's heart had not chosen the wrong person. 3 days later, Mr. Hall came to the hospital and pulled me into a nearby restaurant. He asked how long I had gone without sleep. I said I could not sleep. He joked that his favorite student had finally been stolen by Julian. I stared at him because I had always believed he hated me. Mr. Hall laughed. Every teacher liked me, even Mr. Clark. When my mother called to withdraw me, Mr. Clark had objected first. He said that my feelings for Julian were completely normal and that the right guidance might even improve my studies. Mr. Hall asked whether I still feared returning to school. I said I no longer feared anything. I only wanted to wait for Julian. He warned that the wait could last years. I said I would remain even if Julian slept for the rest of his life. Only then did I understand that loving someone sincerely removed shame. The person became a source of pride that I wanted the whole world to see. Mr. Hall tapped my forehead and called me hopelessly romantic. Then he offered a challenge. If I returned and entered the top 50 students, no one could call me a failure or claim I was unworthy of Julian. They would have to admit that only Ethan Hayes deserved to stand beside him. I asked whether I could withdraw my request to leave school. When I returned, the class welcomed me with balloons and colored paper. Cody, Ryan, and Luke rushed forward and embraced me. No one mocked me. Everyone accepted the truth. I looked at the empty seat near the window and fought against tears. Class 7 remained loud and chaotic, but Julian no longer came to school, and I was no longer the old Ethan. I stopped fighting, running, and making noise. I sat quietly and solved problems. The rumors became prayers for Julian to wake. People wished that we would finally be together. I no longer cared what anyone said. Only constant work could briefly silence my longing. In the third monthly examination, I climbed from near the bottom to rank 487. My mathematics score rose from 27 to 143. Mr. Young told everyone that his student possessed unmatched calculation skills. In the final examination, I reached rank 98. I earned a perfect mathematics score and more than 90 in chemistry and biology. Literature and English still failed, but Mr. Hall became proud enough to join the other teachers who constantly praised me. During winter vacation, I placed a study table inside Julian's hospital room. I completed exercises and talked to him, even though mine was the only voice. Heavy snow fell on New Year's Eve. One snowflake slipped through the window and landed on my pen. Julian remained motionless. I remembered the line on his profile about watching snow and sunsets with the person he loved. My sight became blurred. It had already been 2 months. I asked how much longer he intended to make me wait. In the next semester, I rose to rank 35. I earned perfect scores in mathematics, physics, chemistry, and biology. I became second in our class behind Simon Beck. Only English and literature barely passed. Mr. Hall gave me a certificate and new headphones. He asked whether I had marked the English listening answers backward to achieve a score of 0 in that section. One day, I fell asleep beside Julian's bed and thought I saw his finger move. When I looked again, nothing had changed. I had experienced that illusion so many times that I began questioning my mind. Cody, Ryan, and Luke arrived and tried to take me to an interschool competition combining a 5-kilometer race with academic questions. Every 200 meters, runners had to answer. A wrong answer meant retreating and running an extra section. Our school had suffered badly. The fast runners could not solve the questions, while the strong students lacked endurance. My friends wanted me to replace their final runner. I refused because I did not want to leave the hospital. Then I heard other schools calling us weak. I remembered that Julian had wanted me to live brilliantly, so I appeared at the last moment. Ryan took Nina's race number and attached it to my shirt. Our entire cheering section became wild. Dylan Green shouted my name with such force that I began running before the signal. The referee pulled me back and reminded me to wait for the gun. After the real start, I remained near the leaders. The questions in mathematics and science barely slowed me. At the 8th station, I received an ancient poem and failed. I guessed wildly and was sent backward. The next station asked me to spell a difficult English word. I still failed and had to run another section. I fell from 1st to 4th while my entire school shouted until no voice remained. The third attempt presented a difficult physics problem. I answered within 5 seconds. Principal Martin and every teacher in the stands rose to applaud. I did not meet another literature or English question and slowly regained first place. By the 12th station, my legs had lost feeling, my throat burned, and my vision blurred. I imagined Julian standing in the crowd. The image distracted me. I fell and slid across the ground, tearing my palms and striking my chin. I immediately rose and continued. The final question was physics. I answered at once and raced through the last 200 meters. The moment I crossed the line, I became sick all over Ryan and nearly lost consciousness. 10 minutes later, my friends told me I had won the entire competition with a time of 32.5 minutes. My throat felt as if it were burning. Many bottles of water appeared before me. Among all those hands, I saw familiar white shoes, familiar jeans, and a familiar white jacket. I slowly raised my eyes. Julian stood in front of me and offered water. I stared without blinking, uncertain whether this was another illusion. Everyone began to speak, but Julian signaled for silence. They understood and moved away. He crouched, took my hand, sprayed medicine across the cuts, and covered them with bandages exactly as he had before. Then he asked whether it still hurt. Those words pulled me out of 5 months of pain. Julian said he had just awakened. His father told him that someone named Ethan Hayes had stayed beside him day and night for 5 months, so he immediately came to the school. He began warning that if I continued staring, he would be unable to resist. I threw myself into his arms before he finished. Neither of us could speak. We only held each other so tightly that it seemed possible to become one person. When I finally calmed, I cried and scolded him. He should have slept another year or two and made me wait longer. Julian tried to kiss me. I covered his mouth because we were still at school and promised that he could kiss me at home. He agreed. I pulled him upright and said we were leaving. The moment we entered my home, he held me against the door and asked whether I had truly told his father that I loved him deeply. Embarrassed, I nodded. Julian insisted on hearing the words from my own mouth. I reminded him that we were still young. He promised that he would respect every limit. He said my breakup message had arrived without any explanation of where I had gone. To him, our separation felt impossibly long. I complained that one sentence about breaking up had caused him to punish me with 5 months of waiting. We promised never to use those words again. Julian also promised never to risk his life so recklessly. He looked at my thinner wrists and asked with red eyes how much I had suffered. I smiled. His return was enough. He called me his precious one and praised my place among the top 50 students. I admitted that missing him had nearly made me lose my mind. If studying had not numbed my thoughts, I might have broken completely. Julian held me and said he had also remembered me until madness. The following weekend, doctors examined him and confirmed that his recovery was excellent. When Trevor learned that Julian had awakened, he fled the city during the night. On Monday morning, Julian and I ate breakfast and went to school together. He had insisted on staying at my home the previous night. The next morning, I pulled my uniform jacket to the top of my neck to hide every suspicious mark of affection. The class spent an entire lesson celebrating his return. Students from other classes and even other schools filled the corridor. I stood in a corner and watched the person I loved alive and smiling among the applause. The knot that had remained inside my heart for half a year finally loosened. Everyone pushed me toward him. Dylan demanded that we kiss, but Mr. Hall immediately stopped him. He reminded us that we were still students, that learning mattered most, and that young romance was forbidden. Julian became sad when he realized how much I had changed. I laughed less, spoke less, never slept in class, and no longer played with my phone. I studied with such quiet concentration that I seemed like someone else. That afternoon, Ryan brought fermented fish to class. The moment he opened the container, everyone fled. Julian and I stuffed paper into our noses and played a simple board game. Ryan dared us to taste the fish. I liked other strongly scented food and became curious. Lucas and Julian refused. I leaned close to Julian and offered one unconditional request if he ate a piece. He asked whether the request could be staying at my home again. I said he would need to eat 2 pieces for that. He immediately offered to finish the entire container. I swallowed 1 fish. The smell seemed to soak my soul in the worst place on earth, but I displayed a delighted expression and praised it as the finest food in the world. Julian believed me. He calmly placed a whole fish in his mouth and forced himself to swallow. Lucas took 1 bite and spat it out, accusing me of deliberately deceiving them. I laughed until my stomach hurt. Julian finally understood that his boyfriend had tricked him. After school, we walked through Rose Alley. I told him to stay away because his breath smelled terrible. Julian complained that I had forced him to eat it, then asked for a kiss on the cheek. I refused. He immediately changed his request to a kiss on the lips. I turned and ran. He laughed and chased me. Beneath the sunset, we raced through an alley covered in flowering vines. Their fragrance traveled with the wind across the old walls. After every cold and lonely day, my life had finally become bright again, like flowers opening in spring. The person who once wanted to watch snow and sunsets with me was now directly behind me, laughing as he called my name. Thank you for listening to BL Storytime.